So I'm Jonathan Wynne, and I will, just to clarify what I do at Wiley, I'm part of the international development team, so my responsibilities are being in charge of the sales teams in those regions that Teresa just referred to, including all of Africa, but also Middle East and Central Asia and Central and Eastern Europe. And also for other associated activities and projects, such as working with our partners in developing countries and within INASP and other partner organisations as well. So those two things sort of dovetail together. But I'm part of a sales structure, and I'm going to be unashamed about that in my presentation this morning in referencing the kind of the Wiley context. So what I'll cover in the next 5 to 10 minutes will be a few words about the Wiley context as we see it, then move on to how Wiley and INASP and the partners are working, reference some of the principles behind how we work, which happily dovetail very closely with the principles which have been published recently by INASP and ACU, and then move on to some lessons which you've learned along the way. Okay, in setting the scene, the man who gave his name to Wiley wasn't actually the original. So Charles Wiley founded the organisation in 1807, and these days the current chairman, Peter Wiley, is part of the 7th generation of Wileys. So, in one sense, we are a family firm. You know. An organisation built around one family for over 200 years. I think there's a little bit of a likeness there, actually. I hadn't really remarked on before, but anyway, so that's one of the aspects of Wiley. But the other thing that we are conscious of, and I think in the speeches this morning, presentations referenced this. We are a Wall Street quoted traded company, so therefore we do need to have a story to tell to the investment community every quarter. We publish our final quarter and annual results were published a couple of weeks ago for the last financial year. So there is a big financial imperative, as well as the family structure, and the share structure is split approximately 50-50 between listed and family owned. So that's a sort of piece of the picture. I thought I would just share this. I hesitated, and I thought, no, let's do it, because the International Development Organisation, of which I am part, within Wiley, as with all such good organisations, has a vision and mission, which does reference. Towards the bottom, in the mission statement, it talks about our goal to gain market share, reach, penetration, revenues. These are kind of crude commercial terms that are very much part of the day-to-day language of an organisation like Wiley. But international development we see as somewhere where the needs of high growth and emerging markets or developing markets, developing countries. Terminology varies depending on the context, I find, but developing markets, they do dovetail very, very nicely within the international development section of Wiley, with the financial imperatives that are obviously important to not-for-profit organisations, as they are for listed organisations like Wiley. So we're looking to help students, educators, professionals and researchers to be a partner of all of those individuals through their career, pretty much from the day they enter university as undergraduates to the day they stop having an appetite for training in their professional lives. So we publish and provide services for those areas. So that's a little word on the background of Wiley and where I'm coming from. We've thought about the sort of things that we share in common just by the nature of who we are and what we do with not only our customers but also with INASP and other partners that we work with. And I think there is a lot that's just built in that's in common. We, in terms of values, we are, the word responsibly was used several times this morning in the presentations earlier, and we are trying to expand responsibly. We're trying to make more money for our shareholders, but in a responsible way, through our services, and through our licensing activity. Our objectives, I did recognise quite a few of the things in Joel's and Sophia's presentations this morning as being things that we might have written in terms of being a responsible partner, and being a partner to the university, to help the universities to build their research profile, and to also put the universities ultimately onto the map, push them up the league table. These are things that all of the things that the work that we do really matches those objectives, I hope. So we are both a commercial publisher and a library partner. Those two things can coexist. From a publisher's point of view, I speak for Wiley, but I'm guessing some of these things are true of others in the room. I mean, we from INASP, what we've appreciated really over the years is just the initiative with Perry and the subsequent Perry 2 projects. The fact that it's given us access to a community. It's given us customer contact, customers that we would not have previously come into contact with, and given us an infrastructure in which to operate for the medium term, depending on the situation of the individual countries. And we've also had the opportunity to get to really understand what the right mix of commercial and philanthropic activity needs to be, country by country. So INASP has opened this up, and the work we've been able to do, mainly as a result of those contacts with organisations such as Carly and Tlisk, although we're at the very initial stages in some ways, has really arisen from that. So thank you and full marks to INASP for everything they've done over the last 10 years and more. I wanted to reference a few of the principles that have been published as things which I honestly felt that we do think about a lot in the way we approach our business. Publishing is very fragmented. Journal publishing, no less than other areas. There are 28,000 English language peer-reviewed journals in the world, and it's very fragmented as to who publishes it. So there really is an onus on all of the large and probably medium-sized publishers to get the country context and to really understand when markets are ready to transition and when they're very, very far from transition, and to operate appropriately. So we work with, and there are colleagues from IFL and Research for Life and INASP obviously in the room. We do, and I'm responsible for a fair portion of this, an ongoing audit of where we are and where we need to move on, and where we can help countries to transition on a planned basis as the time is right. It's a very uneven transition process. We recognise that. There are World Bank and other funding organisations are out there. They don't necessarily provide sustainable annual funding, though, as was referenced this morning. So we need to be cognizant of the fact that it seems like there's a panacea from whether it's EU development funding, or in the case of Africa, ADB, or World Bank, but these are not necessarily long-term solutions, but they're part of the mix. The other thing we notice is that every country has got a vision. These sometimes are the objects of some scepticism, and they're not non-specific in terms of the targets. To a certain extent, they're aspirational, but each country has a vision statement, and there are different timelines associated with those, as with the examples on the bottom of the screen. Another principle of the way we've operated, and this is obviously true of most, or probably all publishers in the room, and is working across all markets with library consortia. It's clear that consortia do bring us access to customers in a coordinated and usually centralised manner. It's obviously, the message is very clear this morning that working with consortia is what INASP and what the members of the academic and library community here want us to do. We want to do the same thing. We have been doing this in let's say mature markets from the beginning, from when library consortia first emerged. It's, in a way, it's a no-brainer, but also it's something which we do recognise the differences within the consortium network of the different types, those that are highly centralised, those where even budget is highly centralised, to those where it's highly decentralised, and therefore we do take stock of the differences between different consortia. Usually the whole is greater than the parts in almost every case, but I think probably all of us, reserve the right to match that with direct consortium member activity and relations as part of building a wider network, rather than just flying into the capital city for one meeting and flying out again, which is a limited way of approaching it. But so with that small caveat, I think we absolutely endorse the key role of consortia across all of the countries, the partner countries of INASP and beyond. I wanted to mention a couple of things before I stop, which referencing sub-Saharan Africa, which is obviously widely represented here and talked about, and just in terms of whether publishers can usefully work with both consortia and also ministries. We had a couple of experiences in the last 6 or 9 months of conferences where I and other colleagues from Wiley were present. The AFLE meeting a few weeks ago in Accra, where we met Joel and others, and Innovation Africa in Kigali earlier in the year. It struck me that there was just a vast amount in common. The Innovation Africa event was very much ministries of higher education, of education, and of technology. I guess mainly those 3 types of ministries from different sub-Saharan countries, talking about the issues I referenced in the third bullet there. The last mile in terms of infrastructure, rolling out teacher training, providing hardware, software, textbooks, and so forth. And then AFLIA, which had somewhat slightly more familiar topics, but essentially was very similar in terms of the message that was coming: Africa rising, the role of libraries in helping ministries to achieve their goals and aspirations was absolutely a key message. That the two conferences, although one was ministries and one was libraries, were surprisingly to some perhaps similar, but very much they reflected the fact that the libraries in Africa are really pushing upwards, and I guess probably quite well reflected by the fact that the Minister of Education in Ghana was present at both conferences, so she was particularly aware of the role of libraries in this gradual transition. I said I'd refer to successes and a few lessons that are not necessarily purely Wiley specific, but the need for medium-term planning and also partnering. Again, they seem obvious, but they're easier to do in the UK or Germany than they are in some of the areas in Bangladesh and Africa and other parts that are represented here. So that nevertheless is absolutely key, and having a shared vision of the partnership, including the licensing element that is to come, is really critical. I think from what I heard this morning, we do generally share absolutely the same vision of how we need to partner on a sustained basis. So those are kind of the foundations. The lessons that we learned, which again reference things that are in the INASP principles that were published recently, we certainly realise, not necessarily through bitter experience particularly, but that sudden and unilateral publisher changes are not good in any country, in any situation. So I hope that most publishers here, and certainly in our case, I hope that we at Wiley mix kind of common sense with political sensitivity, with commercial nous, and get the mix of those two things right, so that we plan for the medium term and don't act unilaterally. And a planned publisher exit, if planned over a period of time, can be a win-win, to use horrible business speak. I was thinking that in a way the lesson was not to underestimate the research culture in the infrastructure for technology and so forth in some of the INASP partner countries. But in fact, I concluded that we probably shouldn't overestimate it. There is an awful lot of hype was saying somebody a few moments ago, every time you turn on BBC World or CNN or read The Economist or the Sunday papers, there'll be an article telling us just how much money is coming into Angola, Zambia, etc., Uganda, oil, and so forth. And it seems like there's, we're almost there if you read those things, but so we should not overestimate the fact it takes time to build a research culture. It certainly does to get to infrastructure, even though there are backbones coming through, for example, Africa, and also we have a picture of smartphones proliferating all across these countries, and but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're optimized or that the content is optimized, and it is not a solution that's in place. And we shouldn't judge countries by their lead institutions, so obviously those institutions are represented to a certain extent here, but we do realise, as I mentioned earlier, that the consortium and the head institutions are not part of it. And just to illustrate that, if anybody in the room recognises where this is, that I'll buy them a rather large drink, but this is Alan probably knows it. No. No, not quite. This is the Uganda Martyrs University in Nkozi, where when we were down in last year in Kampala, we did step outside the main capital city, and one of the fringe benefits of doing so, I discovered, is that things like this happen. That suddenly the driver said we're at the equator, and I thought, well, that's interesting. I wasn't expecting that, and it was spring solstice day as well, so it was actually a really good time to be at the equator. So we got our certificates, and then we carried on and went to our meeting. So that was actually a nice bonus. So don't just stay in the capital city. Stuff like this happens. So final slide then, in terms of looking forward, publishers have a choice. Wiley has a choice as to whether it wants a local or a long distance relationship. Both can work up to a certain point, but clearly for the long term, a local relationship, publishing locally, training locally, being present locally are key. It's common sense from a sales and commercial point of view, but it is a topic of discussion to achieve this quickly. Similarly, with a commercial or a partnering relationship, we could just go the commercial route, but it doesn't make any sense to do so. So therefore, all the things I mentioned a moment ago to do with helping early career researchers do better science, do better publishing, getting published, and helping countries where we can to publish their content electronically and so forth. These are things that are part of the role of publishers where we can do. So I mean, for example, we developed something last year which is a textbook collection, which and this isn't a commercial, by the way, it's just an example, which now feels like a commercial break. But journals have been very much at the centre of most of what INASP and Research for Life and most of what we've done with the other and with IFL over the years. So we've sort of felt, what can the libraries play a role with textbooks in emerging markets? Can they play a role with textbooks in general? Licensing of content is what you do. Textbooks usually come in through the side door, through an in-print form, through an academic member of staff adopting a textbook and so forth. Can we join these two things up? So, so we've been experimenting with a few of the countries and via the consortia in mainly across Africa so far with this, and as an example of things that we can do to add value, broaden the relationship and partner. But also all the things I mentioned before at the bottom in the last bullet there, publishing, partnering, author training are critical to long-term credibility and also commercial success in the longer term. If we revert back to the stock exchange slide, so it's a long game, and these are some of the things which occurred to me in terms of how Wiley dovetails with the objectives published by INASP recently. So I will leave it there, and I think hand over now to Olga.
Jonathan, great. Thanks so much. That was really helpful. It's very encouraging as well, I think, hearing.
Thank you.